teach in the department. I'm going to be evaluating this debate. I just need you to tell me your name before you speak. I can do time signals. Is it okay if I just throw up when it gets to that number? Sound good? All right. Well, then we're ready to begin. Who's the first affirmative speaker? Cool. Let me find my timer. All right, you get 5 minutes. And your name?
Paulina Gutierrez.
Can you say your first name one more time?
Paulina.
C-O-N.
Treras.
Thank you. All right, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paulina, and my team is Colette and Madison, and we will be speaking for the topic that nanotechnology involves the ability to see and control individual atoms and molecules. It is because we agree with the physicist Richard Feynman development of nanotechnology and wish to advance in our future that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children using nanotechnology. We define nanoscience that it involves the ability to see and to control individual atoms and molecules. Everything on Earth is made up of atoms, from the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the buildings and houses we live in, and even our own bodies. We also define that genetic enhancement refers to the transfer of genetic materials intended to modify non-pathological human traits. Often, this term is used to describe the efforts to make someone not just well, but better than well. We also define that constitutionally it is a right that is protected from government interference under the contract clause, due process, equal protection, ex post facto law, freedom contract, overbreadth, self-incrimination. Because of the myriad of medical benefits provided from genetic enhancement, this debate goes far beyond opposing subjective opinions because it would lead to population free of ailments. Though patient acceptance and attitudes towards prenatal genetic testing remain conflicted, there has been a rapid progress in gene discovery and a dramatic increase in diagnostic capabilities for carrier screening and prenatal testing for genetic diseases. Prenatal genetic carrier testing uses triple screening, leaving little room for error in diagnostics. This increasingly innovative technology has the power to eradicate genetic disease as we know and provide a quality of life. The U.S. spent $3.5 trillion on health care alone in 2017 and is projected to skyrocket to around $6 trillion in 2026. Imagine how much that could be decreased via genetic modification when a portion of the population could be ensured to hold no ailments. Science has created technologies which provide prospective parents with information which empowers them to make choices, thereby to promote the health of their families. And now technology has made it possible to detect the underlying causes of genetic diseases. Genetic testing can already test for serious and fatal diseases and other various elements, but now could also open doors to disease prevention for HT1 and potentially for other congenital disorders. And if morals are to be key argument, why not consider the 4 principles of biomedical ethics by Beauchamp and Childress: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. And genome sequencing has become cheaper and faster due to technologies such as parallel sequencing by synthesis and the use of nanowire or nanopower methods. Sequencing a human genome today costs roughly a hundredth of what it was in 2001. Also, the technology was made when before the technology was made, women had no choice in any kind of pre-knowledge in their pregnancy. For example, now it is common to know the gender or if a woman is having more than one child using an ultrasound. The ultrasound was invented back in 1956. Since then, more technology has been invented that give parents the choice of having technology used to have knowledge on different aspects. It allows women to have knowledge on what their child could possibly be born with. If parents decide that they want to genetically enhance their children, then they will save thousands of dollars in the long run, not just for the parent, but for the individual as well, when they are old enough and have to fend for themselves. On Monday, November 26th, Dr. He Jiankui created the first genetically edited babies. Dr. Q altered the genes in the embryo by using the CRISPR method. After altering the genes, he helped the embryos in the mother's womb. The genes were altered with the goal of making the babies resistant to HIV infections. So the alteration of the gene by using the nanotechnology worked and improved the quality of life for the life of the twin girls. Due to the increased medical benefits, the improvement of quality of life, the cost benefits, and the rights it gives women, we affirm that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children. Thank you.
All right. Your name.
Rita Gerges,
Can you spell your last name?
G-U-I-R-G-U-I-S.
All right, you do whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, my name is Rita Gerges and my teammates Colby, Lawrence, and Zach. We all negate that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children using nanotechnology. To begin, we're going to define some terms for you guys. So genetically enhanced means the transfer or manipulation of genetic materials intended to modify non-pathological human traits. Right is defined as the moral or legal claim to do something. Lastly, children must be defined as someone who is before the legal adult age. So to start, let us discuss discrimination. Whether it's racial discrimination or socioeconomic discrimination, it is very prevalent in this world society. World War II, for example, has shown how humans that believe that a certain type of characteristic makes you superior will not stop at anything to prove their point. For example, believing that blonde hair and blue eyes is superior to something else led to a mass genocide of a certain type of people. And not only in Germany, it's also here in our own country. Just turn on your news and you can see it. There are many people who believe looking a certain way will put you above others who don't. With no definite end to the scourge that is racial discrimination, providing technology that enables people with those views to alter genes does not seem sensible. Socioeconomic discrimination is a major thing as well. Some German researchers found that not only are gaps in chronic illnesses between socioeconomic classes increasing, but socioeconomic status greatly influences the quality of life. In fact, the same researchers from the 2003 to 2012 in Germany and the rest of the world, the gap between socioeconomic classes increased greatly when discussing the prevalence of chronic illnesses. Now, don't misunderstand us. We relish the idea of diseases such as cancer ravishing human life, but genetic enhancement would only provide that for only a select few that can afford it. Providing wealthy parents the opportunity to save their children, but not providing the same opportunity for the lower class would be discrimination of, and would almost seem to eliminate them from future generations. We ask you, why should parents have the right to genetically enhance their children if not all could benefit? We could bring the issue of affordable health care, but that's a whole different topic in itself. The second point is to bring up the problem of overpopulation. While this might not be a problem right now, in the future it could be a major issue. For example, now we can change things such as eye color, hair color, skin tone, or maybe even diseases. But what if we learned how to make people live forever and never die? Without the aging body, concepts such as living forever start to arise. If people were to stop dying, overpopulation would become more of an issue than it already is. At the current state of the Earth, one researcher informed that the current need for resources is more than the Earth can sustain. That's not even considering the possibility of genetic editing. For example, China just recently absolved the law prohibiting parents from having more than one child. If people were living to be 150 or 200 years old, or even longer, who knows how many countries would be forced to implement regulations such as this, or even stricter ones. We would be forced to ask ourselves, what's the point of curing diseases if we don't live to see the generations that would benefit from those cures? Lastly, because technologies such as CRISPR, which is used for genetic editing, are so new, we might not fully understand them, let alone understand the consequences that might come from them. These technologies have not been used with humans before, and only scientists can guess, and the scientists can guess what those can do to people. And if our estimates are off, then they can lead in disastrous consequences. The issue with genetic enhancement doesn't conclude with where the state of the technology is now. Arguments such as this are so deeply rooted in technology that a proper choice for how technology should be used cannot come without proper education. And because this proper education has not been discovered yet, implications will only arise in the future. As humans who are just now trying to fully grasp the concept of this technology, how can we expect to understand the future consequences? And if we don't understand the consequences, how can we expect parents to make the right choices now?
Okay, there's the cross-examination for 2 minutes. You all ready? Go for it.
What specific scenarios happen today that are equivalent to the scenario in World War II?
Well, if you look on the news, you see police officers shooting young kids, particularly of a different ethnicity than them. You see young children of a non-superior, I'm using quotations, non-superior ethnicity that are more socioeconomically disadvantaged than those. And because of that, they're not getting the resources they need to succeed.
However, were those kids enhanced?
Enhanced?
Yes.
No, because
Genetically.
that's my point. If they're enhanced, it'll only define the difference between them even more.
Have you seen studies that show enhancement makes you live forever? If so, which ones?
Are you familiar with the research from the American Journal of Bioethics saying that currently a harmful gene cannot be removed removed from the population once introduced into the germline? That means that once it is introduced, we can't. Once we do introduce it, it'll only cause more harmful repercussions to society.
Did you know that the germline can be edited?
It actually can't be edited. It was proven in the American Journal of Bioethics.
But also, like, we're arguing that the by genetically enhancing, we're like, let's say cancer. If cancer was brought up like later on in life, then it'll cost like millions of dollars a lot.
Okay, second speaker, 5 minutes. Your name.
So, I really do not
Hold on.
appreciate.
What's your name?
Sorry, my name is Colette Williams.
Sorry, Colette. 1 second. All right, Colette, now whenever you're ready.
So, I really do not appreciate the World War II Aryan race scare tactics that stopped the progression of science solely intended to improve the health of people. It's very unlikely within the current context of ethics, law, and political guidance that selective termination would be performed not just for small facial features, but for sex selection to avoid late onset conditions or to avoid fetuses which are carriers of recessive conditions. In Western democratic societies, aka where this technology is progressing, there is no scientist right now with designer babies in mind. The focus is solely on health. Furthermore, there's a bigger there. You say that, it was said that the American healthcare system and this discrepancy that's being caused is completely another issue on itself, which it is not. This pertains to this issue of health disparity like any other one. There's a bigger argument to be had here about America being the only first country in the world with healthcare statistics which forces citizens to pay out of pocket and go in debt for any medical expense, creating a health discrepancy in itself. So just imagine if a small portion of the population could hold no ailments, which would decrease the annual healthcare that's, again, projected to skyrocket. In previous generations, people had no choice about reproduction. Morals, quote unquote, based in religious ethics, dictated our progression and stagnated us for long enough. This technology is rapidly progressing and has the ability to do great things for the population. The entire population, not just the wealthy, as we stated before, as there are numerous programs underway to remove the financial barriers that some may face, the lead one being UCLA. And these ethics kept us in the dark ages for long enough. People are suffering for long enough, and people have the right to have the choice to to ensure a healthy pregnancy, to ensure a healthy baby, to make sure that a baby doesn't have to suffer. I would really like to see an argument, I've yet to see one, to go against the insurance of a healthy baby, again, a healthy population. Thank you. I will see the rest of my time.
All right. Your name.
Zach Adams, Z-A-K.
All right, Zach. Whenever you're ready.
This house negates that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children using nanotechnology. To start with a quote and a little bit of background, the Journal of Assisted Reproduction and Genetics can be quoted as saying, "However, to start the discussion, we would like to raise several important questions. One of the most important questions is, how do we define the norm of the human genome? With the rapid development of human genomics and the large number of human alleles associated with diseases in human physiological are still being discovered." We can completely agree with this point, and what it really breaks down to is, what's normal? Who defines that? Who decides this? We don't know the answers, and what the opposing house is arguing, we don't know where it stops. To bring up some of the points that the other house made, they claim to control atoms and molecules. What happens in the second generation? Are we still under control of these atoms and molecules that we have now modified in the first generation? What about the fourth? What about the fifth? Where does it stop? How much control of the next generation to an atom and molecule level, which the other house claims to have, do they really have? The 3-time screening, the other side can be quoted as saying, the 3-time screening leaves little air. They claim to have this value for life, this value for children. Can we really worry about little air when it comes to children? Little air? Can we take that chance of little air when it comes to children and healthy children? We don't know. They claim to, but they don't. Another great point. Let's say everything is safe, perfect, no issues whatsoever. What if the parents disagree about modifying their child? What happens then? Brings up a larger point. Should it be the parent's decision to begin with, or should the child have to be an adult in whatever way that is defined where the child is born, no matter what country or state it may be? It's defined in different ways in different areas. That child should have to be an adult to decide for itself. Great example, what if a child is deaf? Is it the parent's choice? Is it their choice to say that it's a disability? Some other senses get heightened when things like this happen. What if the child is okay with that? The other senses are heightened. That's the child's way of life. What if the child enjoys that? Who are the parents to decide, or much less one parent to decide if they disagree? Where do we stop? We don't know. Improve the... I love the bringing up of designer babies. I thought that was great because the exact quote, I believe, was, "No one has designer babies in mind." Well, if the technology progresses, who's stopping that from happening? What legislation is on the books? We open the door to everything. We can't do these kinds of things in the name to stop diseases because, again, when the technology progresses, where does it stop? I understand the people progressing this technology may not have it in mind, but you know what? The guys working on the atom bomb didn't really have killing millions of people in mind either. Look where that ended up. It's not always what we have in mind that occurs. It's what it opens the door to, and we can't take that chance when it comes to these types of things. Another point brought up by the opposing house was the decrease in healthcare cost. Well, that doesn't add up because those being able to afford these modifications and diseases are not those who are suffering from the increased healthcare prices. So what happens to the insurance industry when now the wealthy no longer have diseases and pay into the system? Where does the burden fall? The burden falls on anyone who's not in that 1%, who can't afford this type of editing. That's where the burden falls. It doesn't fall with those who can afford this. Those aren't the people currently struggling to pay their health insurance bills. It's those individuals unfortunately, who can't afford this technology, this Pandora's box that the opposing house wants to open. We can't take the chance. It's too dangerous. Thank you.
So I think 2 minutes. All right. Whatever y'all want to do.
I would like to understand how we're going to control atoms in the second generation.
I mean, it's already down to a science. If you were to read the actual papers that we're debating against, it breaks it all down to a set science. So I would like to ask you, so you talked about autonomy, about how whatever age somebody should be able to choose, they should be the one to choose, not the parents. So autonomy is defined at beginning at age 18. So I want to ask you.
In what country?
In all Western societies.
Okay. Is
America
that what,
for
are we debating modifying children in Western societies?
That's where this technology is taking place. So
It doesn't matter.
So, autonomy is defined beginning at age 18. So how do you propose CRISPR technologies be implemented to an already grown 18-year-old with muscular dystrophy who then chooses to cure themselves?
Who then chooses to cure themselves? Can you repeat that last part real quick, please?
Yes, who then chooses to cure themselves.
Okay.
Something that could have been prevented in utero.
So you are now agreeing with my point, am I correct, that the child should have the choice?
I'm asking you how you think the technology should be implemented if they were given the choice at the right age, because it can't.
It's not our job to debate how it should be implemented. It is our job to debate
But
if
it's something
it
that
should
you
be
brought up.
allowed to be decided by the parents.
You said
I understand what I
that a person
said,
should be able to
but
choose
you're
it, but
you're
there's gonna be a
changing the
point where
topic
it's
of the
not.
debate here.
I'm not changing the topic of the debate at
The
all.
topic is if parents should have the right, not how we go about it.
You said, should parents be the ones to choose this? No, it should be the person. Another
Okay,
question.
so you just proved
So,
my point then.
I-
By saying that parents don't have the right, the person should have
No,
the right
I'm
to choose
asking
it.
you,
I
I'm trying to
appreciate
follow
that.
your logic and then ask you a question on how it could later be implemented, this technology.
You asked me how we should implement it, and
Yeah.
that's not what we're here to discuss today, so I have no comment on that.
It's exactly what we're here to discuss, but
We're here to discuss
go on.
if parents have the right, that's the topic of the debate.
very good deflection. So, if you know you can
That's
prevent.
fine. All right, affirmative's third speaker. Your name.
Madison Parker.
And these are 4 minutes, Madison. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so in the opening speech from the negative side, y'all stated that it's an issue, right is an issue, like it's, you have a moral, so there's obviously a moral issue with y'all, but would there be a moral issue if you know you can prevent a terminal disease in a child before they're even born, you can improve their quality of life, wouldn't it be morally wrong for you not to take that stance? The first 2 babies in China were born using this technology. The children were resistant to the HIV infection that their father had carried. This infection would have been inevitable had they not been genetically enhanced. The quality of life is not better for these children. The technology was used to prevent many of these diseases. And then not to mention these women, when they get pregnant, their biggest fear is having a child that is going to come out with a deformity, a disability. So if you have the chance to prevent that from happening before the child is born, giving your child the best quality of life, you should take that chance. It'll lift the burden of a woman. It will give a woman a peace of mind. It gives them the right to decide how their child should be. And then you'll also mention how it's only going to cater to the wealthy. Well, the most population is not the wealthy, so it won't create segregation because we won't have as many of these babies because only the wealthy will be, I'll say only the wealthy will be able to afford it. But most of the population is middle class or lower class or middle class. So this won't create a problem with segregation because there's not going to be as many. It's going to give people who can't afford it the chance to do this to their children, which if you can afford it, you should have a chance to be able to do this. And then you also state overpopulation. But there's no study that states today that the child is we're enhancing things so they live forever. We're enhancing their diseases so they have a better quality of life, where you can enhance the color of their eyes and stuff, but we're mostly focusing on diseases. We're not trying to make them live forever. We're improving their quality of life. So due to increasing the quality of life, the healthcare benefits, and giving women's rights, we still believe that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children. And I will receive this.
All right. What's your name?
Lawrence Hernandez.
You say Lawrence?
Yes, Lawrence.
Whenever you're ready. 4
All right.
minutes.
All right. Good afternoon. In summary, we argue that the parents should not have the right to genetically modify their children. In our argument, we highlighted 2 major points. The first being that genetic modification would only further widen the gap related to socioeconomic discrimination within the world as we know it. Although allowing human genetic modification could possibly catch and even rid diseases, that science hasn't been proven that it can 100% help anybody and everybody. And the fact that, as I said before, the socioeconomic stance behind that is that only at this point, given the economy going on in not only our country but others, the only people that could afford it are the wealthier, which, as I said, would only widen the gap behind the discrimination going on within the world today. I'm sorry. Okay. Which could result in the product of what? Not only is this the science behind the issue not proven, but several scientists have also, in this field, have also frowned upon the modification of genes prior to a child being born. Our second point is that there could be some concern of overpopulation related to the genetic modification process, although it may not directly affect the human population as is right now. The rapid advance in technology, scientists in the future could find a way to stop the aging process. And with aging being out of the question, it opens the possibility of less reproduction, as well as the possibility of overpopulation. The argument at hand is about the ethics behind genetically modifying your children. And ethically, unless it is available to all, there is no point of doing it, because as far as we're concerned, there is enough discrimination between not only race, gender, or financial status and all over the world. This would only ensure that there is, quote unquote, a perfect human behind, the 1% who could afford, behind their financial status, which would be higher up, as well as their genetic modification being, genetically more perfect than anyone else. So the risk of having a perfect human only furthers the discrimination within the world as we know it. And I rest my case.
All right, we're now in a grand crossfire, which I think lasts 3 minutes. So, whenever you all would like to get in some grand crossfire, you can. Fire.
So in, I believe it was your first speaker, you mentioned something about how this technology has the opportunity to make people better than well. But how would you define better? For example, are you familiar with people or communities such as the deaf community, where sometimes a child will relate to that community, and parents will then view the child, their deafness as like an inferiority, and they'll impose things such as cochlear implants, even though the child does not want that to happen. They identify with their disability. How can you just find, I guess, initially what is better for the child versus what they actually want?
Well, we're talking about embryos, so they're not born yet, so they're not going to know whether they were
So, but
modified
you're
or
not answering my question. What about people that relate to communities with disabilities? Are you saying that they are not better than people that don't have those disabilities?
How can they identify with a group they haven't even been born into yet?
So are you saying we should just cancel out those groups?
I'm saying.
What were you saying? I think given the right, any woman would choose to have a healthy pregnancy, and anybody on this planet would choose to be healthy, given the certain factors that are already in their life. If you already identify with being disabled, then that's you. You have that choice. At the same time, you also have a choice to be healthy and make your child healthy.
Okay, so you're saying basically that if a parent believes that a certain community or disability is imperfect, then it is imperfect regardless of people that identify with that.
Repeat the question.
So if a parent believes, I'll use deafness for example. I'm not deaf, so I guess with that community. If a parent views like a disability or something as imperfect, then how, like, if that's their view, how is that imperfect for, like, compared to other people that identify with that community? Like, if say I were a deaf person and I identify with being deaf, I don't think just because if I were hearing I would be better. So how is that making somebody better than well if it's just getting rid of people that identify with certain disabilities?
I feel like this is just taking away from the fact that every single person has a choice. So I have a question. So you guys, whoever I think was the third speaker brought up overpopulation. So I'm trying to figure out how overpopulation would even come into the equation if, like you guys say, despite the numerous programs underway to make it more affordable, if only the 1% could afford to implement this, yet overpopulation could be an issue. I'm kind of lost there.
Yes, so you say, to answer your question, we're talking overpopulation as a future thing. CRISPR technology, for example, is 3 years old, so we're very uneducated. And of course, education is progressing all around the world, not only in Western civilization, as you pointed out, because a few days ago in China, which is not part of the Western world, a doctor claims to have had 2 babies
He
born.
was educated in America, but
Yeah,
yes.
we're
That's
gene
fine.
edited.
Okay, so Casper, I assume, isn't gonna go?
I mean,
Are you
Casper
gonna
can
be
go
Casper?
if he wants. I'm okay with it.
I didn't know we were Team Casper. All right, well, Paulina, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, so to conclude, my team stands by that parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children using nanotechnology because of the different aspects that we've talked about: medical and quality of life, financial bearings, and more, mainly women's choice. They talk about that we haven't, like, what is normal, but like we're arguing what is healthy. You know, yeah, like they said, there's no normal to life or to any. It's up to their subjective opinions. But we're arguing healthy. Like, what is that women should have a choice when it comes to having a better quality of life for their children. So in long term, they won't like the twin babies that we just found out a few days ago that they were HIV resistant. In their life, they're not going to have to suffer, one, with the disease, with the medication, with money, which can be, thousands of dollars, not just from HIV, but like, for example, in future, other long-term, they're going to save $1 million in healthcare. And like they said, like there's the bearing of discrimination, However, it's different in terms of healthcare because of we've come a long way when it comes to technology, when it comes to what we can and cannot cure, and who knows what we can come up with when it comes to like healthcare reforms, which brings an area of discrimination, which we've also come a long way from discrimination. Also, women's, it's like my teammate mentioned before, they're not born yet. So in a way, the parents are the ones making their choice for them. When they're young, they have to sign, consent forms because they're not over 18. The parents have that choice or that over them. So because of everything that we stated, due to the increased medical benefits and the improvement of quality of life that the children will have, the cost benefits, which can be thousands to billions of dollars, being debt, the parents as well as the children, and the right it gives the woman, we affirm that the parents should have the right to genetically enhance their children using nanotechnology. Thank you.
All right, what's your name?
Colby Williams.
All right, Colby, 4 minutes.
So we have covered concepts such as, we mentioned overpopulation, lack of education on the topic since it is only 3 years old, and discrimination, with our key point being discrimination. We have discussed how technologies that could make some people healthier might not benefit the people that could not afford it, i.e. like middle class, lower class people in the country. They like to point out that it's in Western world, so we'll say America for now, even though this is happening in other places. The opposition failed to properly refute how socioeconomic discrimination would not matter, instead saying, oh, but it only affects a certain amount of people. But if only 1% are able to actually edit genes, then that affects the lower class people because they're not provided the same opportunities. The opposition says that racial discrimination has come a long way, and I agree. Obviously, we've come a long way since whenever this country was first founded, but racial discrimination is still an issue. If you look at news reports, or if you look at just anything, for example, I believe it was during the presidential election, there were multiple problems with topics such as like white supremacy and things like that. Because these topics are still so controversial today, that shows that we are not at a point past racial discrimination that allows us to enable those with those views to continue or to enact. And again, we brought up that they had said multiple times that their purpose right now is to make the child healthier. But the problem that I have with that, or the problem that we have with that, is while that may be the focus right now, because this technology is progressing at such an advanced rate, we don't know 10 years in the future if that will still be the focus. We don't know what will happen when people with the wrong ideals get a hold of the technology. And overall, we have covered how discrimination plays a big factor into this, and the lack of education plays a major factor, considering the technology is only 3 years old. And we did not get to mention this earlier during the crossfire, but they asked how overpopulation is an issue, and we actually made that in our constructive argument that overpopulation is not an issue right now. But because this technology is progressing at such an advanced rate, we don't know what kind of effects it could have on the future. We don't know where the technology will be at in 10 years. And because of how fast the technology is advancing, we have to consider the future possibilities versus what can only be done right now. I receive my time.
Good debate, everyone. All right, that concludes the debate. Cool. Good job.
You were really good. Y'all did really well.
Good stuff.
I know. It's over with. Actually, I'm not going to say I never forbid again. Are you read through all? I am communications. Good job. Killed it. You killed it, Chip.
Well, I told him what I was going to do. Like, I gave him a warning. Like, hey. As soon as I went to lecture, I'm like, oh my god, this is me. This is perfect.
My teammates.
So nerve-wracking. I don't like talking to people.
That's I'm starting to find it.
We're both punching.
It's not personal.
Once I saw y'all were doing it, I was like, oh, that's gonna be perfect because she's gonna like throw it. I was like, it's probably be aggressive.
I mean, it's not like, I don't really, like, at the end of the day, I don't really care. Like, I just gotta argue my squad. Like, yeah, I gotta back the squad. You guys, I mean,
You want to make mad?
like honestly, like, I just gotta back the squad. Like,
I appreciate it, but no thank
I don't know enough about either side. Like, that's what it's about, though.
Yeah, I think this is over a topic we're all passionate about, and I can argue back with you.
You know, like, I'm not smart enough to know the answer. It's for like other classics to credit.
I gotta go to work.
What are we doing? Colby, you staying?
Yeah, I have a class soon.
Sorry, man. Good work, bro.
Yep. See you.
Later, bud.
I don't know. I'm really nervous. I don't like talking to people, even like 3 people. Yes, yes. How are you? Really?
Yeah, because it's like very micro.
Alright, Cass.
Off of Google.
So Amy texted me, I'm leaving now to go teach.
I really like.
Do you want to be in
Shannon.
charge of that?
Yeah.
Do you want to be in charge of that camera though?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll bring it.
Oh, I guess we're still recording, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll stop that. I just realized Shannon will be in here too.
Shannon.
Johnson.
Okay. While we leave these